The Kalahari Empire had been the kings of space for over 3,000 years. Imagine 17 beautiful worlds covered in cities that looked like they were made of pure crystal. These cities shined like diamonds in space, protected by invisible barriers that could stop massive space rocks and weapons so powerful they could split moons in half. For thousands of years, nobody could touch them. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his mighty fleet run away from another battle. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Kalahari were supposed to be unbeatable. Their technology was so advanced that other species looked like cave dwellers compared to them. But now, for the first time in their long history, they were losing. The enemy called themselves the Consume, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't machines or regular aliens with spaceships and laser guns. They were living creatures, but twisted and wrong in every possible way. Picture something that looks like a mix between a giant spider, a jellyfish, and your worst nightmare. And you're getting close to what these things looked like. What made them truly terrifying wasn't just their appearance. The Consume could change themselves. When the Kalahari shot them with plasma beams that could melt through steel, these creatures would somehow grow thicker skin that could resist the heat. When they tried using energy weapons, the Consume would adapt and become immune to that too. It was like fighting an enemy that learned and got stronger from every attack. Vextar remembered the first encounter with these monsters 6 months ago. His scientists had laughed when they saw the biological readings. Primitive life forms, they had called them. We'll vaporize them in minutes. Instead, the Consume had torn through 3 battle fleets like they were made of paper. The worst part was how they spread. The Consume didn't just destroy planets, they infected them. They would land on a world, and within weeks, everything living there would be twisted into more of these creatures. Entire civilizations would disappear, not destroyed, but transformed, into part of the hive mind that controlled these beasts. "Sir, we've lost the Meridian colony," his aide reported, all 4 of his tentacles shaking with terror. 3 billion souls, gone. Vextar felt something he had never experienced before. Complete helplessness. Meridian had been one of their fortress worlds, protected by the most advanced defenses in the Empire. If it could fall, nowhere was safe. He closed all 4 of his eyes and tried to think of any solution. That's when he remembered the old files, gathering dust in the intelligence archives. There were reports about a small blue planet in a remote corner of the galaxy. The species there called themselves humans, and they lived on what the galactic community classified as a death world. Most intelligent life in the galaxy evolved on peaceful planets, with gentle weather and friendly environments. But this planet called Earth was different. It was violent and dangerous, with extreme weather, deadly creatures, and disasters that happened regularly. The reports said these humans had somehow not just survived on this nightmare planet, but actually thrived there. The galactic community had always dismissed them as primitives who got lucky. After all, how advanced could a species be if they were still stuck fighting their own planet just to stay alive? But now, facing an enemy that seemed unstoppable, wondered if maybe being called a primitive Deathworlder wasn't an insult. Maybe it was exactly what they needed. Set course for the Sol system, he commanded his navigator. It's time to speak with the humans. His bridge crew looked at him like he had lost his mind, asking for help from the humans, the species they had spent centuries looking down on as violent barbarians. But as another report came in about the Consume breaking through their outer defenses, even his most prideful officers stayed quiet. Sometimes, desperate times called for desperate measures. The Kalahari spaceship that approached Earth looked like it had been through hell and back. What was once a shining example of advanced alien engineering now looked like a floating wreck. The hull was eaten away by some kind of acid that left deep, ugly scars across the metal. Worse than that, there were strange, pulsing growths covering parts of the ship, living things that seemed to be slowly consuming the vessel from the outside. Captain Jake Rodriguez was having his morning coffee on the bridge of the UN Defender when his communications officer looked up with surprise. "Sir, we've got an incoming transmission from that Kalahari ship. They're requesting an immediate audience with Earth Command. Highest priority diplomatic channel." Rodriguez nearly choked on his coffee. In all his years of service, he had never seen the proud Kalahari use their emergency diplomatic frequencies. These were the same aliens who usually wouldn't even respond. 2 human trade requests for weeks, acting like talking to humans was beneath them. "Put them through to Earth Command," Rodriguez ordered. "This should be interesting." Back on Earth, Ambassador Kethrel found himself in a situation he never thought possible. He was standing in the Human Colonial Assembly building in Geneva, waiting to beg for help from a species his people had always considered inferior. The irony wasn't lost on him. The human building itself was a shock to his system. Instead of the floating crystal structures and energy-based architecture that civilized species used, the humans had built their most important government building out of actual stone and metal. It was solid, heavy, and permanent in a way that seemed almost primitive. Yet standing in that ancient-looking chamber, surrounded by representatives of a species that had clawed their way to the stars from a death world, Kethrel felt smaller than he ever had in the grand crystal palaces of his home world. The human sat quietly as he was announced. No ceremonial music, no floating platforms, no holographic displays showing their achievements. Just simple chairs arranged in rows, with real people sitting in them, watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Honored humans," Kethrel began, and the words felt like swallowing broken glass. Never in his life had he imagined calling these creatures honored. For over a century, his people had referred to them as violent primitives, barbarians, who solved problems with weapons. Instead of wisdom, "We come before you in our darkest hour," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "The enemy we face, the Consume, threatens not just our empire, but all intelligent life in this galaxy. They adapt to our weapons, they consume our worlds, and they turn our own people against us." He paused, looking at the sea of human faces staring back at him. Some looked curious, others seemed almost amused. A few appeared downright hostile, and he couldn't blame them. "We have tried everything. Our most advanced plasma weapons, our quantum disruptors, our reality-bending technologies. Nothing works. They grow stronger with each battle." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "We are dying, and we need help. The hardest part came next. In exchange for your military assistance, we offer you access to our most advanced technologies, faster-than-light communications, energy manipulation systems, medical advances that could extend human lifespans by centuries." The chamber was dead silent. Kethrel could hear his own heart beating as he waited for their response. Colonel Diana Johnson, Earth's Defense Secretary, sat in the front row, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. She was thinking about all the times the Kalahari had refused to help humanity. When the Centauri plague had killed millions of human colonists, the Kalahari had the cure but wouldn't share it. When human mining operations needed access to certain star systems, the Kalahari had blocked them out of spite. When human scientists had requested basic scientific cooperation, they had been dismissed as too primitive to understand real science. Now, here they were, these same proud aliens, offering humanity everything they had previously refused to give, all because they were desperate. "We'll consider your request, Ambassador," Johnson said, her voice as cold as space itself. "Give us time." Too deliberate, Kethrel felt his heart sink. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Deep beneath the streets of Geneva, in a bunker that could survive a direct nuclear strike, Earth's most powerful leaders gathered around a circular table. The room was designed to be completely secure. No signals could get in or out, and the walls were thick enough to stop any known scanning technology. This was where humanity's most important decisions were made. Away from prying alien eyes, General Rick Anderson stood at the head of the table, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays that floated in the air around him. With a gesture, he brought up file after file of Kalahari interactions with humanity over the past century. The records painted a clear picture of systematic discrimination and cruelty. "Let's review the facts," Anderson began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought in 3 interstellar conflicts. "For the past 100 years, the Kalahari have treated us like dangerous animals that somehow learned to build spaceships. The first hologram showed trade negotiations from 50 years ago. Human diplomats, polite and hopeful, requesting basic technology exchanges. The Kalahari response was dismissive and insulting. We do not share advanced civilization with primitive species," their ambassador had said, his 4 eyes looking at the humans like they were something unpleasant he had found on his shoe. Director Amy Foster from Colonial Intelligence leaned forward, her fingers drumming on the table. "They called us Deathworlders like it was some kind of curse word. Like surviving on a dangerous planet made us less intelligent, less worthy of respect." More holograms appeared, showing the systematic way that Kalahari had blocked human expansion into space. Every time human colonists found a promising star system, the Kalahari would suddenly claim ancient territorial rights. When human mining operations discovered valuable resources, mysterious Kalahari regulations would appear overnight to shut them down. But the worst example came next, and everyone in the room fell silent as the data appeared. The Rigel plague outbreak, 23 years ago. A biological weapon that had somehow escaped containment and spread through 6 human colonies. 12 million people had died in agony over the course of 8 months. While human scientists desperately searched for a cure, the Kalahari had possessed the cure the entire time. Their advanced medical technology could have stopped the plague. In days, human ambassadors had begged, offering everything from territorial concessions to complete surrender of mining rights. The Kalahari response had been cold and calculated. "The death of primitives is not our concern." President Robert Hayes, a man who had risen to power partly on promises to make humanity stronger in the face of alien hostility, looked around the table at his advisors. 12 million of our people died because these creatures considered us beneath their notice. Now they come crawling to us for help." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The same species that had dismissed humans as violent primitives was now begging those same primitives to save them from an enemy they couldn't handle. "But here's the thing," Hayes continued, pulling up a strategic analysis of the consume threat. "These biomonsters are going to be our problem eventually. They're consuming everything in their path, and sooner or later, that path leads to Earth. We can either fight them when they're at full strength after eating the Kalahari Empire, or we can fight them now while they're still busy." Director Foster nodded. "The consume represents a genuine threat to all life in this sector of the galaxy. But the Kalahari represent a political threat to human expansion that's been choking our growth for a century." General Anderson smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "So we have an opportunity here. We can eliminate the consume threat and solve our Kalahari problem at the same time. 2 birds with 1 stone." The vote was swift and unanimous. Not a single person in that room spoke in favor of simply helping the Kalahari and walking away. Humanity would intervene in this war, but not as saviors coming to rescue the mighty Kalahari Empire. They would intervene as opportunists, using the crisis to fundamentally reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Jennifer Brooks, head of Earth's military forces, was already pulling up deployment schedules on her personal tablet. "I'll begin mobilizing the fleets immediately. It's time to deploy the Darwin Protocol packages." She looked up at the assembled leaders, her eyes bright with anticipation. "It's time to show the galaxy what a real death world produces when it decides to go to war." The human fleet that arrived in Kalahari space looked nothing like what the galaxy expected from a primitive species. Captain Danny Williams stood on the bridge of the UES Predator, watching through the massive viewport as his ship's biological weapons prepared to deploy. This wasn't going to be a traditional space battle with laser cannons and energy shields. This was going to be something entirely different. The Consume had adapted to every weapon the galaxy had thrown at them. Their living ships could evolve new defenses faster than most species could reload their guns. Plasma weapons that melted steel barely warmed their hulls after a few shots. Energy beams that could crack planets became useless as the creatures developed immunity. For millions of years, the Consume had perfected the art of biological adaptation, turning every attack into a lesson that made them stronger, but they had never encountered anything from Earth. "Release the first wave," Captain Williams ordered calmly. What happened next would have looked like magic to most galactic species, but to humans, it was just applied evolution. Tiny capsules shot out from the human ships, each one smaller than a marble but containing millions of microscopic passengers. These weren't machines or energy weapons. They were living creatures from Earth, but modified and enhanced by human science. The first wave consisted of tardigrades, creatures so small, you'd need a microscope to see them. On Earth, people called them water bears because of their chubby, bear-like appearance under magnification. But these tiny animals were possibly the toughest creatures in the known universe. They could survive in the vacuum of space, withstand radiation that would kill most life forms, and endure temperatures that would freeze or boil almost anything else alive. The human scientists had taken these already incredible creatures and made them even more dangerous. The modified tardigrades swarmed over the Consumed bioships like an invisible plague, eating their way through the alien hulls and reproducing inside the ships themselves. The Consumed tried to adapt, growing thicker armor and producing antibodies. But the tardigrades had evolved on a planet where survival meant being tougher than anything else in existence. Lieutenant Kelly Davis, the ship's biological warfare specialist, watched her screens with satisfaction. The tardigrades are establishing colonies inside the Consumed vessels. Their adaptive systems can't keep up with the reproduction rate. But that was just the beginning. The second wave of human bioweapons was already deploying, and this one was even more terrifying. On Earth, there existed fungi called cordyceps that could take over the brains of insects, turning them into zombie-like creatures that served the fungus instead of their own survival instincts. Human scientists had weaponized this concept, creating fungal spores specifically designed to infiltrate the Consume's hive mind network. The spores drifted through space, like invisible death, seeking out the neural connections that linked individual Consumed creatures to their collective consciousness. Once they found their targets, the modified fungi began to grow, spreading through the alien neural networks faster than the Consumed could adapt their defenses. Captain Williams watched in amazement as entire Consumed fleets began to turn on each other. The hive mind that had conquered civilizations was being torn apart from the inside as infected creatures received conflicting signals from their compromised neural networks. "This is incredible," breathed Navigator Tony Clark, staring at his tactical displays. "They're not just dying, they're fighting each other." The Consume had spent millions of years perfecting their ability to adapt to external threats, but they had never encountered an enemy that fought from the inside out. Earth's weapons weren't trying to overpower the aliens' defenses, they were bypassing them entirely by using biological warfare strategies that had evolved in the constant life and death struggle of Earth's ecosystem. Within weeks, the unstoppable force that had devoured entire star systems found itself helpless against creatures from a single death world. The Consume's adaptive biology, their greatest strength, became useless against organisms that had been forged in Earth's crucible of constant evolutionary warfare. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as reports came in from across Consumed space. The hive mind was fragmenting, individual creatures were going silent, and entire fleets were drifting powerlessly through space As their biological systems shut down, one by one, the humans had done what the mighty Kalahari Empire couldn't. They had found a way to kill the unkillable. And they had done it, not through superior technology, but through superior evolution. Ambassador Catherall stood at the window of what used to be the Kalahari High Command Center, staring out at a sight that made his heart sink. Human ships filled the space around his homeworld like a swarm of metallic insects. But these weren't just any ships. They were construction vessels, mining platforms, and military carriers. The humans weren't just visiting, they were moving in permanently. The consume was gone, the biological nightmare that had threatened to devour the entire galaxy had been wiped out in a matter of weeks by these so-called primitive Deathworlders. The Kalahari Empire was safe from extinction, but as Catherall watched human workers setting up what they politely called monitoring stations on 17 different worlds, he realized that safety had come at a price no one had expected to pay. Commissioner Billy Nelson, a human diplomat with kind eyes and a friendly smile, sat across from Catherall at the conference table. He was reviewing something on a small electronic tablet, occasionally nodding, as if everything he was reading was perfectly reasonable. The casual way he handled the complete restructuring of galactic power was almost more unsettling than outright hostility would have been. The terms really are quite fair, when you think about it, Nelson said, looking up from his tablet with that disarming human smile. Earth will provide complete security for all former Kalahari territories. Our fleets will patrol your space. Our bases will protect your worlds, and our technology will ensure nothing like the consume ever threatens you again. Catherall's tentacles curled nervously as he processed what he was hearing. And in exchange, simple. You contribute 60% of your industrial output to the Terran Defense Fund. Think of it as a reasonable insurance premium for guaranteed protection by the galaxy's most effective military force. Nelson's tone was so friendly and reasonable that it took a moment for the full impact to sink in. 60%, more than half of everything the Kalahari Empire produced, their energy, their manufactured goods, their technological innovations, their artistic creations would now flow directly to Earth. What was left would barely be enough to maintain their basic civilization, let alone fund any kind of independence. This isn't protection, Catherall whispered, his voice barely audible. This is conquest. Nelson's smile didn't waver, but something changed in his eyes. For just a moment, Catherall saw something that reminded him why humans had been labeled as Deathworlders in the first place. Behind the friendly diplomat was a predator, one that had learned to hunt not with claws and fangs, but with contracts and legal documents. Ambassador, Nelson said, leaning back in his chair, your people came to us desperate and begging. You asked the Deathworlders to save you from an enemy you couldn't handle. We delivered exactly what you requested. He gestured toward the window, where human construction crews were working around the clock to build permanent installations. The fact that we turned out to be more efficient at running things than the species we saved, well, that's just evolution in action, isn't it? The truth hit Catherall like a physical blow. The humans hadn't come as saviors at all. They had come as opportunists who saw a chance to eliminate two threats at once: the consume and the Kalahari Empire's stranglehold on this region of space. The biological weapons that destroyed the consume were just the opening move in a much larger game outside the viewport. Massive human construction ships were assembling what looked like a space station, but Catherall recognized it for what it really was: a military command center that would control everything that happened in this star system. Similar structures were being built around every major Kalahari world, creating a network of human control that would be impossible to challenge. Your people blocked our expansion for a century, Nelson continued conversationally. Refused to share medical technology that could have saved millions of human lives. Called us primitives while you profited from keeping us locked in our own corner of space. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling activity of human ships claiming their new territory. Now we're in charge, And somehow, I think we'll do a much better job of managing galactic affairs than you did. The most terrifying part wasn't the conquest itself, it was how completely reasonable the humans made it sound. They had given the Kalahari exactly what they had asked for: salvation from the consume. The fact that this salvation came with a price tag that would reduce the once mighty empire to a client state was just good business. As Catherall watched, human workers erecting permanent bases on worlds that had been free for thousands of years, he realized that his species had made a fundamental mistake. They had assumed that mercy and ruthlessness couldn't coexist in the same action. The humans had just proven them wrong. Sometimes the most merciless thing you could do was give people exactly what they begged for. The age of human dominance had begun, and it had started with a simple request for help.